They did not just break in. They tore every single thing to shreds with a fury only a beast is capable of. But Arthur did not know that yet. At 2:00 a.m., the world was still quiet, wrapped in the deceptive peace of a harvest moon. The drive back from the festival had been a blur of laughter and warm air, Arthur's hand resting on Sarah's knee, the truck tires humming against the asphalt. They were high on the community spirit, that rare, golden feeling of belonging that only small towns could cultivate. But as the truck crunched onto the gravel of their driveway, the feeling evaporated, replaced by a cold, prickly static at the base of Arthur's neck. The farmhouse stood dark against the tree line, but something was wrong. It was not a sound. It was a presence. Arthur killed the engine. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy. "Did you leave the side gate open?" Sarah asked, her voice dropping to a whisper, though she had no reason to be quiet. Arthur shook his head. He opened the door and stepped out into the cool night. The mud near the porch was churned up. He frowned, clicking on the small flashlight attached to his keychain. The beam cut through the dark, landing on the wet earth right beneath the bedroom window. Arthur's breath hitched. There were footprints. Deep, heavy indentations. He squatted down, his heart beginning a slow, hard rhythm against his ribs. The tread pattern was distinct, a cross-hatch design with a worn heel. He looked down at his own feet. He was wearing the exact same boots. But he had not walked here. Not today. Not for weeks. "Arthur," Sarah called from the truck, her voice trembling. "Get inside," he hissed, rushing back to her. Quickly. They fumbled with the keys, the lock clicking loudly in the stillness. They stumbled into the hallway, Arthur locking the deadbolt, the chain, and the bottom latch. He did not know why he was so afraid, but the image of those boots. His boots, printed in the mud where he had not stood, sent a primal signal of danger to his brain. Then came the knock. It was not a frantic pounding for help. It was a rhythmic, heavy thud. Thump, thump, thump. Arthur froze. Sarah gripped his arm, her nails digging into his skin. "Who is it?" Arthur called out. He tried to make his voice sound commanding, like the owner of the house, like a man with a shotgun, though the gun cabinet was upstairs. "Neighbor," a voice replied. It was a man's voice, flat and unmodulated. "Car broke down. Need a phone." Arthur frowned. "Which neighbor?" "Jimmy," the voice said. Arthur went cold. He knew every soul within 20 miles. There was no Jimmy, and more than that, the voice on the other side of the woods sounded wrong. It lacked the cadence of a local. It sounded rehearsed, like someone reading lines from a script they did not understand. "We see not help you," Arthur said, stepping back. "Leave, or I call the sheriff." "You do not have a phone, Arthur," the man said. The blood drained from Arthur's face. He had not told the man his name. "Open the door," the voice commanded. The pretense of the stranded motorist vanished instantly. "Open the door or we open it." "We," Sarah whispered, eyes wide with terror. Arthur looked toward the living room window. Through the sheer curtains he saw movement. Not one shadow. Many. They were swarming the porch, circling the house like floodwater rising. He saw the glint of metal, crowbars, maybe axes, catching the moonlight. "The basement," Arthur whispered. "The tunnel." It was a desperate idea. The farmhouse was old, built on the foundations of a Prohibition-era structure. There was a narrow, earthen tunnel that led from the root cellar to the old carriage house, now a rotting shed near the woods. It had not been used in decades. "Arthur, my jewelry, the safe," Sarah started, panic making her irrational. "No," he snapped, grabbing her shoulders. "Look at them." At that moment, the sound of breaking glass shattered the standoff. It was not just one window. It was simultaneous. The kitchen window to the left, the living room bay window to the right, and the glass of the back door all exploded inward at the exact same second. It was a coordinated assault. They were not trying to sneak in. They were flooding the house. Arthur looked at the stairs leading up to his guns, then at the heavy oak door leading down to the basement. If he went up, he could fight. He could shoot maybe 2-3 of them, but there were at least a dozen shadows out there. He would die protecting wood and drywall. Down, Arthur shouted, shoving Sarah toward the cellar door. Go. He threw the bolt on the basement door just as the front door splintered inward with a deafening crash. He did not look back. He plunged into the darkness, leaving his home to the swarm. The air in the tunnel was thick, smelling of wet earth and ancient decay. Arthur's flashlight beam danced erratically against the low timber supports as they scrambled over piles of discarded crates and loose stones. Sarah was sobbing quietly, a breathless, jagged sound that echoed too loudly in the confined space. Keep moving, Arthur urged, though his own legs felt like lead. Above them, the floorboards of the house creaked and groaned. They reached the end of the passage, a heavy iron-bound door that led up into the carriage house. Arthur threw his shoulder against it. It did not budge. The wood had swollen with years of dampness, sealing them in. No, 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 Arthur muttered, slamming his fist against the wood. He grabbed a rusted pry bar from the dirt floor and jammed it into the crack, heaving with everything he had. Above their heads, the sounds changed. Usually, a burglary is a series of scuffles. Drawers opening, footsteps, the clinking of valuables. This was different. This was industrial. It sounded like demolition. Arthur heard the distinctive screech of timber snapping. Then the crash of the grandfather clock. A sound he knew well, smashing against the floor, followed by the rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack of something heavy destroying the mechanism. They were not stealing. They were erasing. Why are they doing that? Sarah whispered, pressing her hands over her ears. Arthur looked up at the ventilation grate near the ceiling of the tunnel, which opened out near the foundation of the house. Through the slats, the noise was deafening. He could hear guttural grunts, men exerting themselves not with the tension of crime, but with the joy of destruction. Desperate, Arthur dragged a crate under the vent. He had to stop this. He had to know why. Hey! He screamed up through the grate. Take what you want. Just leave. The police are coming. The noise above stopped instantly. It was a terrifying, sudden silence. Then, footsteps approached the vent from the outside. Heavy boots crunching on the gravel. A face appeared in the slats. Just a silhouette against the moon, but Arthur could feel the eyes. The police are not coming, Arthur, a voice said. It was the same voice from the front door. And we do not want your things. They retrash. Just props. What do you want? Arthur pleaded, his voice cracking. Who are you? The man chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. I'm the one taking it back. UV had your turn. UV worn the clothes, UV slept in the bed. But the performance is over. The real copy is coming home. Real copy. Arthur stared at the grate, confusion warring with fear. You re-crazy. Am I? The man shifted. We re-scrubbing the stain you left. Every chair you sat in, every picture of your face. It all has to go. We re-making room. From inside the house, a sharp, high-pitched yelp pierced the air. It was Buster, their golden retriever. The yelp was followed by a wet, sickening thud, and then silence. Arthur fell back from the crate as if he'd been struck. Sarah screamed, burying her face in her hands. He did not have to die, the voice from the vent said, devoid of any sympathy. But he barked at the wrong master. He did not recognize the real one. That SA defect. The footsteps walked away. The destruction resumed, louder than before. The sound of tearing fabric, of the grand piano being smashed with sledgehammers, of drywall being kicked in. Arthur sank to the dirt floor, the pry bar slipping from his sweating hands. They were trapped in a hole in the ground while a group of lunatics dismantled their life piece by piece. The hopelessness was a physical weight, pressing on his chest. He looked at the rusted hinges of the door. If they stayed here, eventually the men would come down. And if they did to Arthur and Sarah what they did to the piano, or the dog. Arthur, Sarah said, her voice hollow. She pointed to the bottom of the door. The hinges. They re-rusted through. She was right. The pins were nearly disintegrated. It was not about opening the lock. It was about breaking the anchor. Arthur gripped the pry bar again. The despair hardened into something cold and sharp. They had killed his dog. They were destroying his home. He was not negotiating anymore. It took 10 minutes of agonizing, silent work to shear the rusted pins. With a final, groaning heave, the heavy door fell inward, not opening, but collapsing entirely. Fresh night air rushed into the stale tunnel. They crawled out into the carriage house. It was cluttered with dust and cobwebs, but it was outside. Arthur helped Sarah to her feet. They were safe for the moment. They could run into the woods, make for the highway. But Arthur did not run. He moved to the dusty window that faced the main house. The curiosity was a sickness. He had to see the face of the man who called himself the real copy. The house was ablaze with lights. Every lamp was on, casting long, frantic shadows against the curtains before the curtains were ripped down. The front door was gone. In the yard, men were tossing debris onto a pile. Not stealing it, burning it. And then Arthur saw him. The leader walked out onto the porch. He was holding a flashlight, directing the others. He turned, the porch light illuminating his features clearly. Arthur's breath stopped. His heart missed a beat, then hammered a frantic, irregular rhythm. The man on the porch was wearing a red flannel shirt, Arthur's favorite shirt. He was wearing jeans that fit exactly the way Arthur's jeans fit. He had Arthur's haircut, the same slightly receding hairline, the same beard trimmed to the exact same length. It was not just a resemblance. It was a mirror image. But it was not a supernatural double. As the man turned his head, Arthur saw the imperfections. The nose was slightly too broad, possibly broken and reset to look like Arthur's. The hair was dyed. The roots showed a lighter shade under the harsh light. The man moved with a studied stiffness, as if he were constantly thinking about how to walk. "Get that upstairs bedroom cleared," the leader shouted. It was Arthur's voice, or rather, a terrifyingly accurate impression of it. He you," Sarah breathed, clutching Arthur's arm, her eyes wide with horror. "No," Arthur whispered, the realization hitting him with the force of a physical blow. "Yes, not me. Yes, trying to be me." This was not a robbery. It was a usurpation. These people believed, truly believed, that Arthur was the fraud. The way the man moved, the entitlement with which he gave orders. He did not see himself as a criminal. He saw himself as the rightful owner returning from exile, clearing out the squatter. "He stole my life," the leader screamed at one of his subordinates, pointing at a pile of Arthur's books. "Burn it all. I want it clean for when I start again." The subordinate nodded with fanatical devotion. "Yes, Arthur. We'll fix it." They called him Arthur. The horror of it was absolute. If Arthur ran to the police, what would he say? That a man who looked like him, dressed like him, and sounded like him had moved in? In the chaos, in the dark, who would the police shoot? The man standing calmly on the porch, or the dirty, desperate figure emerging from the woods? The leader looked toward the carriage house. He did not see them, but he seemed to sense them. He smiled. A smile Arthur had seen in the mirror 1,000 times, now twisted into something predatory. "Check the shed," the leader commanded. "I want to make sure the rat is gone." 3 men broke off from the group and started marching toward the carriage house. They held axes and lengths of pipe. Arthur looked at Sarah. He looked at the woods. Logic was useless here. You cannot argue with a delusion that has teeth. Arthur grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her out the back of the carriage house, moving low into the tall grass. They hit the tree line just as the shed door was kicked in behind them. "They here," a voice shouted. "Runners." The hunt was on. Arthur did not panic. As his boots sank into the damp leaf litter, a cold clarity washed over him. The copy on the porch had studied Arthur's appearance. He had studied his voice. He had probably watched the house for months to learn his schedule. But he did not know the land. Arthur had grown up in these woods. He knew where the ground went soft and swallowed boots. He knew where the old rusted fox traps were hidden in the brush, left by his grandfather and never cleared. He knew where the ravine dropped off suddenly into sharp rocks, hidden by brambles. "Follow my steps exactly," Arthur whispered to Sarah. "Do not deviate." They moved deeper into the darkness. The flashlights behind them were erratic beams cutting through the trees. The pursuers were loud, arrogant. They thought they were chasing a frightened suburbanite. They did not know they were chasing a man on his own territory. "Spread out!" the false Arthur shouted from somewhere behind. "Flush him out!" Arthur stopped near the edge of the Black Hollow, a marshy depression filled with stagnant water and sucking mud. He crouched behind a fallen oak. The first pursuer came through the brush, swinging a baseball bat. He was moving fast, eyes on the distant movement of trees, not the ground. Snap! The man screamed as his leg plunged into a concealed sinkhole, the mud gripping him like concrete. He fell forward, his face hitting a rock. He thrashed, but the more he moved, the deeper he sank. Arthur did not wait. He moved to the right, guiding Sarah up a rocky incline. A second man appeared, panting. He saw Arthur's silhouette and lunged. "Got you, you fake piece of—" Arthur sidestepped. He did not fight. He simply let the man's momentum carry him past, straight over the edge of the ravine. The scream was short, cut off by the crunch of impact below. The copy could not mimic this. You see, not mimic instinct. They circled back. Arthur was hunting now. He was not protecting his property. He was protecting his existence. He led them through the briar patches that tore skin to ribbons, through the nest of ground hornets he marked with a specific stone. One by one, the pursuers fell to the hazards of a world they did not understand. Finally, silence returned to the woods. The flashlights were extinguished or lying stationary on the ground. Arthur stopped. He was covered in mud, bleeding from a dozen scratches, his knuckles white. He stood on the ridge overlooking his house. The fires in the yard were dying down. The house was a hollow shell, windows gaping like dead eyes. The copy was down there, alone now on the porch, screaming names into the dark, waiting for his men to return with the prisoner. Arthur raised a heavy stone from the ground. He could go down there. He could finish it. But Sarah pulled his hand. "Arthur, let us go. We have the truck key. We go to the highway." Arthur looked at the man on the porch, the man wearing his face. The man who wanted his life so badly he had killed for it. "He can have the house," Arthur said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "It's just wood." They retreated, leaving the copy to his victory. 2 hours later, from the safety of a police station in the next county, they watched the dawn break. The police went in at 8 a.m. They found the house destroyed, the interior gutted. They found the men in the woods, broken and trapped. But on the porch, they found only a red flannel shirt, neatly folded on the railing, and a pair of boots left side by side. The copy was gone. Arthur sat in the sterile waiting room, holding a cup of lukewarm coffee. He was alive. He had won. But as he looked at the other people in the station, a deputy walking by, a man in handcuffs, a janitor mopping the floor, he felt a cold shiver that would not leave. He found himself staring at the janitor's chin. "Is that my chin?" He looked at the deputy's walk. "Does he walk like me?" The intruders had destroyed his furniture and his windows, and he could replace those. But the man in the woods had destroyed something else. He had taken away the certainty of being unique. Arthur took a sip of coffee, his eyes darting to the glass reflection in the window. For a second, just a second, the reflection did not blink when he did. He knew he would never sleep soundly again. Somewhere out there, Jimmy was still walking. And next time, he would know the land.